AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Don Carr is kind enough to join us. For over 15 years, Don Carr has investigated, written about America's worst polluters, from the gas fields of North Dakota to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. His writing has been featured in Political, Sierra Magazine, the Washington, D.C. City Paper, Huffington Post, Grist, Civil Eats, and other places as well. And he's appeared on numerous outlets as well. He has a brand new book, a piece of fiction, though, The Midnight Rambler. It's a hardcover. It's going to be out, and he is going to be over at Comma, a bookshop, tonight. It's in Linden Hills, 4250 Upton Avenue South in Minneapolis. He'll be there from 6:30 to 8, and he's kind enough today to join us to talk about the book and the signing. Don, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Matt, it's really great to be on your show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for the time. Now, once again, I want to start with the fact that you have taken a path. I've talked to other people that have done this as well. You've taken a path that that some people have. They've been a writer. They've been reporting news, especially kind of feature reporting. But then at some point, you made the decision: I'm going to write something. I'm going to write a novel. So first of all, let's talk about your writing about covering, the polluters. I mean, that's some pretty noble work you've been doing out there.
Well, that's kind of you to say. Yeah, for about the past 15 years, either for outlets or for national environmental groups like EWG or the Environmental Defense Fund, I've done investigations and reporting on from everywhere from the gas fields of North Dakota down to the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. And it's been really a rewarding writing career to do that and to research and do those investigations. But as you said, the dream is for a lot of writers is to kind of write that novel, that you got kicking around in your head. And I grew up reading a lot of my heroes, Elmore Leonard, Tom Clancy, Robert Ludlum, those style books. And so I really wanted to write a novel in that vein.
Well, and so first of all, congratulations. That's really cool. I mean, I've had authors on. It's always fun to talk to a first-time author, not necessarily a writer, but you've got your first book out there. Congratulations. That is a really big deal, man.
Thank you very much. It's super gratifying to hear that. And, the whole process, the whole experience has been fantastic. And then, to have the writing community here in Minnesota embrace you and help you out and do book signings and all those other things that are going on, it's just been a dream.
And you're not joking about that. William Ken Kruger, Elaine Shannon, Bob Meyer, Heather White, Doug Parker, all writing very complimentary things. So let's talk about how did you approach, once again, the book is The Midnight Rambler, a novel. How did you, coming from your background, how did you approach going in, I'm going to write this novel?
Well, like everything else, it's a strange occurrence. I've had the luck to go to Italy with my wife on her sabbatical, and she had a month-long sabbatical in Italy, and she was smart enough to pick just one town to do her sabbatical in, as opposed to being a tourist all over the country. And so she picked beautiful Positano, which is on the Amalfi Coast. And so I'm sitting in Positano, and I'm looking down at this bay full of these amazing yachts, because it's a really wealthy kind of enclave. These massive yachts are in the bay. And growing up, watching Bond movies and reading these spy novels, I kept thinking to myself, when's one of these going to explode? And so that was kind of like the impetus of how the story started. And then while I was there, two other things happened. One was we were driving by Mount Vesuvius, and there was smoke coming off Mount Vesuvius. And I asked the driver, like anyone else with a volcano, is it active? And he said, no, that's the mafia. And it turns out for over 40 years, the mafia in southern Italy has been taking toxic chemicals, dumping them on Mount Vesuvius, and just setting them on fire. And so this kind of gave me the kind of gestation for the story and where I was going to go. And then when I got stateside, I was actually working on a nonfiction book proposal about biofuel fraud. And in that process, I interviewed a bunch of EPA special agents. Now, I'd worked and written about the environment for 15 years. I didn't realize the Environmental Protection Agency had special agents that had guns, badges, and were kicking down doors and arresting polluters. And when I had that realization, that's when everything kind of clicked together in terms of I have a really great idea for a protagonist that no one's ever really written about. And there's tons of books about the FBI, the CIA, but no one ever done the EPA. And then finally, the Midnight Rambler component is, and this is strange, but this is how things work. I was in Italy. I was reading a book. I was reading the 50 songs that make the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Chapter 24 is about the Midnight Rambler, and it turns out Mick and Keith wrote that song in Positano, the only song they'd ever written in Italy, and it's about a serial killer. It's about the Boston Strangler. And so all those kind of components together really brought the idea to the fore.
All right, I don't want to skip past the lead here. What was that about the mafia dumping toxic waste into Mount Vesuvius? Holy God, you're serious that they are dumping toxic waste into Mount Vesuvius?
It is a long tradition in Italy and in southern Italy. There's a whole middle management called stakes. and these are people that their whole job is they broker between companies in the EU, because the EU has much more stringent pollution controls for manufacturers than we do here in America. So they're always looking at ways to get rid of their waste, and the Camorra Mafia is there, and for a price will take that off their hands, and then their attitude is simply they dump it on Mount Vesuvius and start it on fire. And so you have cancer rates skyrocketing in the area.
Wow.
It has been a decades-long problem, and the Mafia there only thinks day to day. They never think about the long-term consequences.
Yeah, we used to throw virgins into volcanoes, too. We kind of learned our lesson on that one. That wasn't going to stop, make it rain or anything like that. All right, so why don't you give us the synopsis here? Why don't you give us just a little bit of a breakdown? What exactly is the Midnight Rambler about?
It's about EPA Special Agent Sophie Grant, and she is tasked with going to Italy to fight this toxic waste dumping cartel, because the place they're dumping the chemicals is right next to the U.S. Joint Naval Base, which has 10,000 service members and their families. So their water is getting polluted by this, and that's the threat to America. That's how it's justified that Sophie's sent over there. But when she's there, she engages in a broader conspiracy that is actually ensnares her long estranged father. So it's a story about a father and a daughter connecting as well.
Talk about, obviously, you bring the chops when it comes to understanding environmental issues here. But then what was your process about stepping back and stepping away from this and not making this sound like a news story? Because it sounds like, I mean, obviously it's got some parallels and it could easily do that. So talk about the process for you of making sure this stayed a novel and just didn't become sort of, kind of news fan fiction.
That's a great question. And, two things I'll say to that. First is, I spent the bulk of my career and the bulk of my day kind of writing in that vein, this very dry, kind of pointed, investigative journalism style. And so not wanting to do that, just the joy of writing something creatively, I wanted to break away from that. And then second, I'm just a huge fan of like all the action movies of the 90s that I grew up on. So whether it's Armageddon or, Die Hard, well, that was late 80s, but, those style of movies. And so I would put myself in the headspace of kind of an action thriller headspace by just churning and rewatching those movies over and over again. That kind of put me more of a playful, over-the-top action movie headspace.
Let's also talk about developing a character, because it's obviously one of the things, and as I've worked, I'm not a journalist, I'm a talking chimp, but at the same time I work in the kind of the news media side, and so you meet people, and obviously they're real people in there. Talk about how hard it was for you to kind of create the well-rounded character.
Well, thank you. And for me, Sophie, this female protagonist who's the EP special agent, she's kind of grizzled. She's in the middle of her career, and I had a lot of people kind of to draw from and make a composite out of it. My mother, my wife is an environmentalist, and so I kind of brought those thoughts into. And then I've worked with a ton of really strong, powerful women in the environmental movement who are fearless, who are on the front lines, fighting for clean water and clean energy. And I drew all those kind of personalities in to make this composite character.
Do you feel as if, as a person who does the reporting, and I think sometimes it becomes a drone because basically there's a lot of corporate interests that don't want to change the way things are. I mean, we're looking at a current situation. It's going to be 50 freaking degrees in Minneapolis next week in early February. We clearly have a broken planet. We need to do things, but yet we're still having people doing everything in their power to make sure nothing ever changes. Do you feel as if, okay, fine, I mean, if we can put the news stories out there, but if we start creating relatable fictional characters that are dealing with these issues, it might actually resonate in more areas?
Matt, you've really drilled down on something really important there. One is folks like you are out there helping get these messages out all day long, and I need to thank you for that. But to your question, I did a couple stories for Sierra Magazine in the past year, and I talked to people in Hollywood. And there's a big movement in Hollywood to make sure climate change and environmental issues are brought to the screen. They're brought into our scripted entertainment. And the reason people think that's so important is, as you said, you can hear as many reports about the sky is falling. We're going to have a tick infestation if we don't have enough cold winter months here in Minnesota. All the bad things are going to happen to us from our environment, but we kind of get glazed over and bored by that. So by kind of incorporating storytelling into the narrative, into the environmental narrative, and then when you're watching a TV show and you're following that character through the woods, you're identifying with them and what they believe. And the hope is that when you integrate more of these themes, and you don't have to hit people in the head, right? I mean, my book is a whole, just a big explosion of fun and action adventure with just a little side serving of broccoli. That's kind of how I looked at it, right? Just like put that little spoonful of medicine in. I think that's kind of the way that we tell these stories and get people more aware of what's happening with our planet.
You obviously, I'm hoping this has gone well for you so far. Are you having plans for obviously making this into a series?
It is a 3-book series plan. Yes, I don't want to give too much away.
All right.
But the next book will be a little more focused on the Midwest, and Superior and my home state of South Dakota will play in this a little bit. But yeah, it's a 3-book series, and I'm excited. I'm already starting the second one.
I know some areas we could go do some writing about.
Yes, sir.
I'm presuming you already got it already, but I got a few places we probably could put side notes in there. Well, congratulations on this. Who's the publisher? Let's make sure we mention them too.
Corler Books is the publisher, and they're fantastic, and I love my publisher.
Beautiful. They always do. Corler Books. All right, so the event tonight, and it is tonight. We want to make sure people get out there. 6:30 to 8 tonight. It's where at, once again?
It is at a bookshop, which is at 4250 Upton Avenue in Linden Hills.
All righty. And once again, Don Carr is going to be there. The book is going to be available, and I encourage people to stop on out and enjoy this. Don Carr, the book, once again, The Midnight Rambler, just out right now. Don, congratulations on the first novel. That is a huge deal. A big congratulations there. All my best tonight, and by all means, come back when you get the second book done, okay?
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you, and thanks for everything you do in your show. Really appreciate it. Bud.
I appreciate it. Don Carr, kind enough to join us. The Midnight Rambler is the book. We'll take a break. Come on back. Wrap up the show on a Tuesday. And when we do return, it's the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950.